Hi, Joe Cerrone.
And Al Rosen.
Welcome to our weekly meeting for CAD 116 Basic AutoCAD.
We're going to be in chapter 4 today.
And chapter 4, as we've talked before, but we'll review that, we have these links color-coded. Remember that the green means CAD drawings, the blue means reading material, and the purple means videos. And so as we look at these exercises this week, we're going to cover in our general design assignment, polylines. And so we have this polyline and inquiry drawing. We've recorded these videos, so we don't necessarily need to go through during our Zoom meeting and go through the recordings, but the best way to learn CAD or one technique is to watch the recordings, and you can pause them, you could rewind them. And so we do a lot of recordings. Here's our recording from June 2020. Always good to go like this. So you can always add us, to the like section if that's something that you feel is appropriate. And as we go through, we explain how polylines work and some of the
also closed caption, by the way.
That's right. That's one of the reasons that we use YouTube, is because we need to close captions for people who, for a lot of reasons, and YouTube does it automatically. Okay, so that's one of our videos. And then if we backtrack here, back to our home page, general design assignment, and then there's a mechanical, and then there's an architectural bonus assignment. And so as we look at these assignments in CAD, here's our general design assignment, working with polylines. And then here's our mechanical assignment. I don't have the architectural assignment open at this time. We'll have to come back and look at that at a different time. All right, back to our main splash page. The drawing files are located right here. And so when you see DWT, what does that mean, Mr. Rosen?
It's a drawing file, but only is used like pulling a piece of paper out of a file and laying it down on your paper on your desk and drawing. It brings up a copy of it.
So it's a template file, which gives you the ability to save it as a different name. And so when you see this P-line drawing, it opens it up, and yes, it's finished, okay? But at the other side of it, it's very hard to get people to do these type of instructions on a blank sheet of paper. And so what we're asking the students to do, turn on your grid, turn on your snap, and then to create these different polyline shapes, I'm going to turn on my line weights. And as you get used to navigating things with AutoCAD, get used to using this little arrow, they call them glyphs now, to show your menu bar. With the menu bar on, you can get these commands from the pull down, and they use words instead of pictures because it's really somewhat difficult to describe what to do with just pictures. And then as we look at these, we can go into the tools and drafting settings, and we work with snap and grid on this. And so here's a snap. Snap will make the increments for the cursor movement 1/8 of an inch. And the grid is a visual. And so every grid square is 1/2 an inch. And so you can see this is a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch geometry here. We like to use polar tracking. As we start to work with this, polar tracking will give you this green line, kind of like a tape measure, and I'll demonstrate that. And so when polar tracking is on and I draw a line, let's draw a polyline, what it will do is it will track. That's what that green line is that you see. And if I turn off the grid, you'll see it even better. And so in the settings, it lets you set the increment value to 10 degrees. I would traditionally set them to 15. I think I have them at 10 because we were doing a different assignment. But here I can go 1/2 an inch and then track up 1/2 an inch, 1/2 an inch. And so they're not meant to be difficult, but the idea behind using polylines versus irregular lines is that they're closed shapes. And so as we start to work with CAD, I'm going to type C for close here, these geometries can be used for other things too. So we can analyze them. One thing we can do is to go into the utilities and we can measure the area. And so if I say measure the area, and I want to measure the area of an object, it's glitching, excuse me. So back to that again. Area, down arrow. Yeah, it doesn't want to do it. Somehow there's something glitching. Area, object, finally. And we click on it. And then it tells me that the area of that part is 1.25. And that's going to be in square inches because this is an inch drawing. And so as we create these different shapes, we'll then go through and be able to add chamfers and fillets to those objects. But the real beauty behind using this type of line versus a regular line using a polyline is that we can 3D print them. And so when we go into something like an isometric view, we can use commands to extrude them or press pull them. So if I were to press pull, I can then pull this geometry up like that in wireframe. We can verify these things in conceptual that they're there. And then I can 3D print something like that. And so I can go and I can export it as an STL file. And I'm just going to throw it on my desktop. Actually, I won't put it there because I'll never put it back. Let's just go. And I'll put it in my 116. And I'll just call it drawing 1 STL, save it. And then I'll hit this, hit enter. And then I have these slicing softwares. And so here's my 3D printer. It's all hooked up. I have one right next to my desk. If I put my hand in there, yeah, maybe it's not hooked up. Unfortunately, I have to reassociate it. It might be okay. And then if I open that file from where I just put it, there it is. It's going to be really tiny because you have to convert inch drawings to millimeters. And so the technique is to take and scale it once you bring it in by a conversion factor of millimeters to inches, which is 2540. And then I can print that. And so I can go and I can prepare it and I can tell me how long it will take me to make that. And so in 29 minutes, I can have a 3D printed part. Now this is just a shape, a widget, but think about some of the other things that you might want. I have a car that has a problem with the LCD display and it just starts flashing and distracting me. So I just made a cover for it. I just cover that part up. I 3D printed it in 20 minutes. And it's things like that that these applications work really well for. So polylines will allow us to do things like work with 3D printers, and it will also let us do things like Boolean operations. But to get started, as this is a new course, we can just take a top view and you can create these different shapes and these geometries. I'm just going to copy this over to here. And so you're to go through and just copy these shapes over and then to do the required task. And the task would be like to move the vertices, where I can go and click on that. And I do have snap on, even though I don't have grid showing, the snap is invisible, but it's still there. And so I can create these other geometries, change the line thicknesses with the width command. And so I could say p-edit. Select the polyline and then change the width to 0.125. And so 0.125, enter, enter. And this is how we used to have to assign line weights. We go back quite a ways into different ways to work with AutoCAD. I would watch the video to learn how to do this one. This one's a little tricky. With polylines, you can use an arc option. And this is the sketch command. And so map making and other details can be made using the sketch command. And so if I were to say sketch, And then what it's going to ask me is to set the increment amount. I'm going to leave it alone at this time. And then what I'll do is I'll just click once to put the pen down, and I'll hold that. I'll try it again, click once and drag. So this increment isn't working. Why is that, Al?
You got the snap on.
Exactly. So I have to turn off the snap. How do I do that? Just type in snap is one way. And then I'll just go and I'll say off. And then when I go back and I sketch, I can sketch our displays topography if I haven't had too much coffee.
Yet.
Yeah, I do like to be caffeinated. Seems like putting caffeine in everything anyway. And then as I get closer, hit enter. And with these polylines, you can still edit them. You can click on these grips. And so CAD is very fluid. I can go and I can kind of work with these curves, be a little bit artistic on it. And then once they're closed polyline shapes, which this is, I can actually go through and do the same operations I was doing before, you know, where I can go to an isometric view. And if I wanted to, I could extrude these too. Takes more computer power, the more complicated the geometry is, but you can do quite a bit. And we can create these topographical maps with 3D lakes, little boats on them, you name it, we can model it. And so that's one of the things we like to do. And this is just a spline. And I'm not going to go through the entire video with how to do this because we already have one. But that's essentially some information on polylines. And then if we come back to our main splash page, we have an additional general design called an Osnap drawing. And so object snaps allow you to create these different geometries, excuse me, let me go back to model space here, where we can use this button right here. And this is what's called an object snap. And what they do is they're magnets. Whenever we're in a draw command and we're near an endpoint, it will magnetize to that geometry. And we'll get a glyph for that midpoint, which will look like a triangle, or we'll get a glyph for that intersection, which will look like an X. And so with these object snaps on, what I can do is I can go through, yellow is a tough color, so I'm going to make this darker. Tough color to see against a white background. But if I hover and I turn on a line command and I hover around a center, if I have center on, I don't think I have it on. There it is. Oops. It's one of those days. Center. There we go. And then I go into a line command. If I hover there, acquired, and then I bring it to a midpoint. Now, if I don't get the one that I want, shift right mouse click and then choose the O-snap, and that becomes the strongest O-snap in the group, and it will win. And so I can draw a line from the center to the midpoint, or I can draw a line from a midpoint, shift right mouse click to a tangent point. And so in geometry construction, this is very helpful. As far as to where that information is located, the information in module 4 is located under content. And then if we look at chapter 4 and labs, and I'm sorry about the chapter module. It just seems that sometimes that's just small things, but we use those pretty much the same way. So with that, you know, here's our assignments. There's some additional bonus assignments. Here's a PowerPoint. And so if we download that, and then we talk about that information as well. And so if I open that and I can look at that, once it's done, my computer's so slow today, I'm not gonna. And then here's a link to the old AutoCAD fundamentals. And so this was what we used before D2L. And this is back when we had drafting boards and such. over at the Skokie campus. Al and I used to run a lot of the programs there. And then somewhere in here, there's an Osnap. Let's see if it's on the line. Here's our polyline drawing. Here's some information on text. And I'll have to do a little bit more searching. It might be in 3. Yeah, it's in 3. And so here's the instructions for that. And I'll make sure that we post this onto the main page because I didn't see the actual instructions. And so we'll call it Osnap instructions. And I'll just put it into my 116 directory and I'll add that to our area. But as you can see, we're using these different object snaps. Center, I should have used perpendicular, but I think everybody gets the idea. And then you can go endpoint, tangent, quadrant, intersection. And so these construction techniques make your drawings super precise. And that's what we want to do, is we want to be accurate. The computers are so accurate, they're more accurate than the machines used to produce them. And so when you get down to different types of production methods, they have certain tolerances or certain amounts of precision that we can work within.
Here's the video for it, Joe, right there.
Ah, very good. And so again, you know, work through the videos. You can just kind of glean your way through them. If you're like me, people who go through these typically look for the content that they want, and then they just watch that part. We do have analytics, and so we can check on that. And usually what we find is if it's a 20-minute video, if we get people to watch 10 minutes of it, that's pretty good on average. I'm sure there's people who watch the entire things. And then as we go through, here's some information again on our polylines, our O-snaps. Let's take a look at the actual content from the chapter. And so as we look at these, we have the outline of topics here. Okay, so module 2 is due today. When we look at module 2 or lab 2, here's chapter 1, chapter 2. These are digital textbooks now. So just like your math book, there's a lot of other things that we don't assign. And so when you get down to it, you're welcome to work on more material, but we'll explain to you the basic things that we want. And so in module 2, the basic things that we want are a architectural floor plan drawing or a mechanical part drawing. And so your choice of these drawings is due today. And you can choose which one. You can go back to the module 2, and here's the videos for it. So once again, you know, we try to get things set so that you can just watch the video and then learn the construction techniques. This is some AutoCAD stuff, but it still works quite well. It's like watching a TV show that's a couple of years old. We don't necessarily have to make the show over and over again. All right, back to content. And then if we look at our outline of topics, we try to stay on task. And so as we go through and we look at where we're working on these, we're at module 4. This should actually be up one more week because today is the 10th. Kind of goofed up a day here, but we will fix that. Spring break is next week, so we will not have a Zoom meeting next week. Wednesday, take the day off, go to Florida, go to California, whatever you decide. It's a little tricky out there because I think they're self-quarantining now, so maybe you don't want to go anywhere at this time. But from a standpoint of following our outline of topics, we're doing quite well. You should be taking the module quizzes with the topics. We don't assign due dates for those. We just leave them open for you. Take them as you go, but you will miss the points if you don't do those quizzes. We don't take them away, so there's no expiration on them. You have till the end of the course, but it's a good idea to take the module quizzes with the modules as you're going through those. All right, so if we look at chapter 5 in the textbook area, chapter 5 is on line standards and layers. And again, we have videos for these, but if you're into CAD and you want to be able to work with it, then you need to know some of the basic objectives behind how line standards and layers work. And we have a good video for this. Essentially, what we're talking about is, what is an object line or a continuous line? What is a hidden line, and how are they used? Okay, back when we had pencils, we'd buy a 0.3 millimeter pencil. We'd go to the bookstore and we'd buy 3 pencils, one for hidden lines, one for center lines, one for object lines, and we'd have different leads in there. Leads would have different softness values, which would appear darker on the paper. And so as you learn to draft, you're learning how to create these graphical representations of mechanical and architectural parts. And there's rules for it. Things like how to represent a dimension line, how to represent a cutting plane, break lines, etc. And that's what we do. We incorporate those into our drawing assignments. So you might not know you're learning it, but if you follow the directions and use the correct layers and line types, we'll let you know in the feedback how that's supposed to be. And so as we look at this, we can see that this part pivots because it's got a phantom line position, which is used to show that this part moves. And we have hidden lines to show features which might not be visible. You think of yourself as being Superman with X-ray vision, and then you can see some of this geometry behind the metal there. And then as we work with layers, we talk about different layer standards. And so the title blocks that we use that Al has programmed for you have layers and line types associated with them. And we want you to use those layers and line types in the mechanical drawings. So dimensions should be on dimension layers, object lines should be on object line layers, hidden lines on hidden line layers. Layers are very powerful in AutoCAD. You don't need to know how to do everything in the layer command. Light bulb, sun, they do kind of the same thing, on and off, freeze and thaw. The difference is back in the days when we had older computers that it would regenerate the display, and then using a frozen layer would not make the computer regenerate the database. And so it was a little quicker. I remember working for Komatsu Dresser in Libertyville. At the end of the month when payroll was running, we were on mainframe, the computers would slow down to a crawl. You'd push a button and then wait a few seconds. You push a button and wait a few seconds. And so that goes back to old time computers. Colors, line types, how to load them, and then how to associate the correct line type to the correct layer. And they do a lot of other things, like how to go through printing and plotting, on and off. Here's freeze and thaw. You can lock layers so that they can't be erased or modified. Sometimes facilities people will lock the floor plan layers because they don't want people to move the walls. How do you know if the furniture is going to fit if somebody modifies the door frame? And so facilities people will use CAD quite extensively. And then filters. As you get better with it, you can filter out certain commands or certain layers based on what geometry you want to use. Layers for plumbing, HVAC. Design Center is an excellent tool. We'll go through this a little farther down the line. It's a content manager, allows you to put blocks and layers, and then to borrow blocks and layers from other drawings as well. And so they go through things like how to copy layers from other drawings. And that's a big thing. You can spend all day setting up these layers and they're quite tedious, or you can open up their drawing in Design Center and then just drag those layers into your current drawing, and it will take the layer and the associated property of that layer and include them into your new drawing. So these drag and drop abilities are real time savers. And then just more CAD computer work. And then here's the review. You'll see questions like this on the review quizzes and things like that. You'll see them on the midterms and on the final. And that's how we kind of standardize so that we're not just drawing things, but we're drawing things that have vocational outputs. So somebody who understands how to create geometry, drawings, uses these rules is employable, or at least has some standards to follow, so that if we go out there and get hired by a company to do mechanical parts, well, we get a good understanding that we're going to use object lines, center lines, and dimensions on that. And we have a number of courses that will help you increase your abilities in those areas. Hardest part sometimes is just getting started. Okay, with that, I'm going to go back to our main splash page, and I'm going to come back up here to our basic AutoCAD. So for this week, our assignments are chapter 4. You have plenty of time to do these. The chapters and the modules are visible for you. Take your time, go through them. You don't have to watch all the videos. You don't have to read all the material, but you do have to do the assignments. So I would very often just look for the boldface text when I was doing my homework and just figure out what it is that we wanted to do. And we will explain it to you. We want you to complete the polyline drawing and then choose the mechanical assignment or the architectural assignment and to take the quiz. With that, I feel like I'm starting to talk a little too much, Al. Let me know if there's anything I need to cover. And
go up to the top, please. Click on quizzes and tests, please.
Sure. I'm going to go in as a student. Is that correct?
Please.
And then quizzes and exams.
That is correct. So when you do that, you'll see 1/16 test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. all the way down. That goes along with our chapter/modules. So you're all set, ready to go. If you click on one of them, please, Joe, for a moment. And here's the thing. Here's our little description for you.
And you'll go through and you'll take the test. You know, click the start button to begin. It doesn't look like I'm allowed to start it because I'm
right, because you're not a student. But this way we can show it without goofing up a quiz.
And same thing for assignments. As you turn in the assignments, you will get a notification that you've turned that in. And then you'll also see the rubric or how you will be graded.
You also, if you go back one more step, please, one more step. And if you go on the far right-hand side, you'll say date due, please. You're looking for also for that too at the same time.
Say that again, please.
Right on the bottom of assignments on the right-hand side, please. There's date due.
Gotcha. So it's programmed out. And so we want you to turn them in by the dates because it's important to meet deadlines. And you will be docked if you don't turn your drawings in on time, unless you tell us why. And it's so we are putting deadlines there because if we don't, then people won't know what to do. But if you do have something that you need an extension for, that's normal policy in this business. Ask for an extension. Companies will constantly continue to put more work on your desk until you say, I got too much work to do. I can get this one done, but the other one's going to have to wait. So if you can't get the drawings done on time, ask for an extension. And Al's usually pretty good about that.
Yep.
All right, Al. I think we've done pretty good at explaining things. Let's open things up for questions and end this recording.
Sounds great.
All right, I'll stop the recording and open things up for questions now.